Welcome to First Parish. My name is Kim, and I'm a member of the Worship Committee. First Parish is a vibrant, welcoming congregation that welcomes all people to grow deep faith and take bold action. We are so glad you are here with us today. This sanctuary is made holy by your presence. If you're joining us for the first time, please take a welcome packet from the pew rack. There is information about our services and our child care. If you fill out the yellow card inside the packet and drop it in the offering plate, you'll receive our weekly email newsletter, which can help you get to know us better. My fellow greeters, Walt and Beth, and I are both wearing tags, and we'll be standing by the doors after worship is over. Please join us, and we'll walk to social hour together or answer your questions. We strive to make our worship experience accessible to people of all ages and abilities. Please see the welcome card in your pew for more information on this, or speak with an usher at the back of the church. The work of living our faith is done both in and out of worship, so I draw your attention to the printed announcements that came with your order of worship. These announcements are important news of our community life, so please read them carefully. Extending a generous welcome is a spiritual practice, and I invite all of us to extend that welcome to our neighbors by taking a few minutes to greet them warmly.
Let's continue our spirit of gathering by rising in body or spirit to sing our opening hymn, number 113 in your gray hymnal, Where is Our Holy Church? You may be seated. Daniel and Andrew McPherson Artinian will light our chalice this morning. And we say together the words of the call to worship. Come, let us gather together. We gather to celebrate the sacred within and among us. We come to seek spiritual growth and understanding. We strive to practice acceptance, forgiveness, and love. Together we work to build a world with justice and compassion. Come, let us gather together. It is a brand new year, and when the worship committee came up with the idea of a monthly theme focused on how we follow through on what we say, on the relationship between our words and our deeds, it seemed clear that January ought to be the month to do it. This month, when we're encouraged at every turn to reassess our lives and the relationship between who we are and who we want to be. Classes at the gym that were nearly empty a month ago are now filled to the brim. No one is ordering dessert. We're drinking less wine. We're getting more sleep. We're reading that book that we always meant to, and we're working on a new savings plan. It seems natural for us to do a similar kind of return to our intentions and living them when it comes to our spiritual life as well. So we begin this morning with a poem by Anne Hillman. We look with uncertainty beyond the old choices for clear-cut answers to a softer, more permeable aliveness, which is every moment at the brink of death. For something new is being born in us, if we but let it. We stand at a new doorway, awaiting that which comes, daring to be human creatures, vulnerable to the beauty of existence, learning to love. Amen. Would the kids like to come forward for the story this morning? If you'd like to, you can. You don't have to. There are all these choir chairs. Okay. All right. Some brave souls coming forth. So you can sit in these front chairs, or you can sit on a step. So one of the things that it's really good to do, that we do a lot in church, is to revisit old stories for new meanings or for new ways that we can feel their meaning in our lives. Even though the story doesn't change, sometimes the way we read it does. It's okay, Graham. So I know that most of you have heard the story of the Good Samaritan before. At least that sounds familiar. Have you heard it? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah? Okay. Can anyone tell me how it starts? So there's this lawyer, and he goes to Jesus, and he says to Jesus, "How can I find eternal life?" And Jesus says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." And the lawyer says, in a lawyerly way. He wants to know exactly what the rule is. "Who's my neighbor?" And so Jesus answers him by telling him this story. He says that there was a man who was robbed and beaten and left for dead by the side of a road, a really dangerous road between Jerusalem and Jericho. And he was found by a couple of passersby. First was a priest, someone who was very high up in the religious order, who looked at the person by the side of the road and passed him by. Next was a Levite, a member of another religious order, another person who had a lot of status and probably the ability to help, and he also passed him by. The third person who passed by this person by the side of the road was a Samaritan. And the Samaritan was one of the people who was considered the lowest class of the time. They were considered to be kind of unclean and not as holy, and they were usually the poorer folk. And he stopped without question and helped the man. And he helped him, and he sent him forth and even gave him money for a place to spend the night. He took him to a place to spend the night and gave him money. Now he says, if you go and do likewise, you will know who your neighbor is. Do you guys learn a lot about how to help other people in school and at home and at church, I hope? Yeah. And we all want to think that we would be the Samaritan, right? There were all these things that kept the priest and the Levite from helping the man by the side of the road, including some of the laws of their religion that said that they couldn't be unclean by helping someone who was bleeding or dirty in the particular way this man was. And the Samaritan was one who didn't worry about that and who helped anyway, who took his heart as his lesson, right? Now, we like to think that we would be the Samaritan in that story all the time, right? Don't you like to think that if you saw someone who was really hurting, you'd, of course, help them, that there wouldn't be any barriers to you helping them? But that's not always true, is it? Sometimes it's really hard to have the courage to help someone who's in need, right? Have you ever had that experience? Have you seen somebody maybe being picked on and been afraid to say something? Well, I had that experience once, and I've told, the adults might find this a familiar story because I told it a few years ago, but I don't think you guys heard it. I had this experience when I was in elementary school where I was one of the newer kids in school, and I had been kind of picked on for being new. And I was from a foreign country, and it was a country that was in the news a lot, Iran, it's in the news again. And I really had a hard time making friends. And it was really, really a joy for me when I finally got to make my first friends, and I felt like I had somebody that I could hang on to. And then pretty soon there was this even newer kid, and he was kind of a funny-looking kid. He had really straight blonde hair that stuck out in all directions, and he was very shy, and he was very sweet, but he really wasn't known by the other kids. So the picking on turned from me to him, and I was kind of relieved, I have to say. And even though I liked him and I rode the same bus and he lived down the street from me, when he was being picked on by the new friends that I had made, I had a really hard time speaking up on his behalf. And I will tell you that I have felt badly for not speaking up for all of these years since. And every time I've thought about it, I've had a different kind of insight into why I did what I did or didn't do what I didn't do. And every time I've thought about it, I've also been inspired to make sure that I stand up for the next person I have a chance to when I'm feeling a little bit stronger. So even though we hear a lot of these stories in church and we like to think that we're supposed to be the good and virtuous ones, I want us to remember that sometimes we learn just as much from the times we haven't been able to do the thing we knew we should do. So if we can take our time and we can share our stories of the times that we're a little bit embarrassed about, the times that we felt like we fell short, that's what church community is for, to help us learn to be strong together and make different decisions the next time, so we can be on the side of justice, so we can know who our neighbors really are, so we can learn to love better and stronger and fuller all the time. What do you think about that? Can we work on that together? Okay. you all are going to go to a workshop now and learn a little bit more about some neighbors that you might not know as much about. And we are all going to make a commitment as we send you forth to let our lights shine as much as we possibly can and help each other in doing so. So let's rise in body or spirit and sing This Little Light of Mine, and we'll sing you all out to your workshops.
This morning's reading is an excerpt from Audre Lorde's The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action, originally delivered at the Modern Language Association's panel called Lesbian and Literature on December 28, 1977 in Chicago. She begins the passage by discussing insight she gained from her journey with breast cancer, after which this passage begins. In becoming forcibly and essentially aware of my mortality and of what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities and omissions became strongly etched in a merciless light, and what I most regretted were my silences. Of what had I ever been afraid? To ask questions or to speak as I believed could have meant pain or death. But we all hurt in so many different ways, all the time, and pain will either change or end. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence, and that might be coming quickly now, without regard for whether I had ever spoken what needed to be said or had only betrayed myself into small silences while I planned someday to speak or waited for someone else's words. I was going to die, if not sooner than later, whether or not I had ever spoken myself. My silences had not protected me. Your silence will not protect you. What are the words you do not yet have? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own until you will sicken and die of them, still in silence? Perhaps for some of you here today, I am the face of one of your fears. Because I am a woman, because I am black, because I am lesbian, because I am myself, a black woman warrior poet doing my work. Come to ask you, are you doing yours? And of course I am afraid, because the transformation of silence into language and action is an act of self-revelation, and that always seems fraught with danger. But my daughter, when I told her of our topic and my difficulty with it, said, "Tell them about how you're never really a whole person if you remain silent. because there's always that one little piece inside you that wants to be spoken out. And if you keep ignoring it, it gets madder and madder and hotter and hotter. And if you don't speak it out, one day it will just up and punch you in the mouth from the inside. In the cause of silence, each of us draws the face of our own fear, fear of contempt, of censure, of some judgment, of recognition, of challenge, of annihilation. But most of all, I think, we fear the visibility without which we cannot truly live. And that visibility which makes us most vulnerable is that which is also the source of our greatest strength. Because the machine will try to grind you into dust anyway, whether or not we speak. We can sit in our corners, mute forever, while our sisters and ourselves are wasted, while our children are distorted and destroyed, while our earth is poisoned. We can sit in our safe corners, mute as bottles, and we still will be no less afraid. Here ends the reading.
Our spirits long to be made whole. We are gathered here in this church. People have gathered right here in this building for centuries out of that yearning. And we know that there is something about speaking our truths that helps us fulfill that need. When brilliant and brave women like Audre Lorde spoke their truths in the decades when modern women were finding their voices, and then enough voices came forward in enough places that they started to be taken seriously, and young people of many shades began to see their own skin colors and sexualities and life experiences mirrored in those of such leaders, the world was changing. There are now more places for the voices of those who once would have been thought to be on the margins to be heard. There are organizations that catalog instances of racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, all of the systems of oppression that stand in the way of us seeing each other fully. Artists and writers and actors and musicians have given expression to so many of the ways of living, of thinking, of being in the world. It's a beautiful thing. And yet, Audre Lorde's words of nearly 40 years ago still resonate, don't they? Everywhere we go, we're surrounded by people's stories on social media, in blogs, on reality television, in the newspaper, on the subway, and in the grocery store. With all of those modes and places of speaking, for all of the ways that there have been progress in confronting oppression, there are still abiding silences. Silences that within and among us can be deadly. One of the most publicized ways we've seen that happen is in the cases of bullying that have been broadcast in recent years. Young people are seeming vulnerable in whole new ways that are uncomfortable to contend with. There's a lot of speculation about the cruelty of kids these days and the role of technology in magnifying it. And children are taught very intently that they are to avoid behaviors that make them bullies, trained to spot bullying and try to report it. But all of the peace education I know about, and I will just give a shout out to Peace First and Eric Dawson's wonderful work in that regard, all of that work that is actually successful, that moves people to become peacemakers, to speak through silences, to stand up for what they know is right, is rooted in knowing our own stories and opening our hearts to those of others. To make ourselves visible and to learn to see our neighbors more clearly. It's not quite as easy to teach as a set of rules like the lawyer was asking Jesus for, like we want to be able to offer our kids, but it's essential to our survival. The poet Mary Oliver writes, "Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine." And it's a beautiful line to read. It speaks to a longing for intimacy and being known, to be able to just lay down the burdens of the pretense of having our lives together in order to say what's really happening for us. Though that longing is fierce, our practice of fulfilling it, perhaps our faith that it's even possible to fulfill it, is limited. The well-established models we adults have are really of running from ourselves and suffering in silent agony over the tragedies mounting in the world. And that doesn't exactly qualify us well to teach it to our children, or to teach our children a different path. But I think there's a lot that we can all learn together. In some ways, like the priest and the Levite in that Samaritan story, those of us who live with even just a single factor of privilege, even if it's just the appearance of our skin or the level of our education or our conforming to a traditional gender norm, even with just one slice of privilege, we don't want to be seen as having any despair at all, do we? The road to further happiness, to fitting that picture of success, is lined with having our act together, Why would we want to bear our own personal potholes for the world to see? I arrived here in Milton after 6 years of ministry among folks who were visibly struggling in our society, people who had no place to hide what they were struggling with, folks living on the streets in San Francisco, women and children in a shelter from domestic abuse in Boston. In so many measurable ways, life in the suburbs is better. The plumbing almost always works, for one thing. Meals are easy to come by. Health care is within reach. Our most vocal complaint is that our lives and those of our children are too busy with activities to enrich them. And yet the private stories here are of some of the very same struggles as the folks who live with uncertain shelter and psychological and physical scars from the wounds of national wars or very private ones. I just want to see a show of hands of those whose lives have never been touched by domestic violence or substance abuse, mental illness, financial insecurity, or job loss. Anyone? And if you've never witnessed or been party to racism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, classism, sexism, anyone? There are differences of degree and intensity for sure, and those matter greatly. There's a deeper cushion in a community like this one, for sure. The support networks of people or finances that have helped us weather the injustices are a little stronger. But there's also a burden that's born in the hiding. Making it look as if everything's okay when it's not adds a level of stress that's a suffering all its own. I witness it among us and within myself. The silence does not protect us. It keeps us isolated. It keeps us small. It keeps us powerless. When this last financial crisis hit, there were a good number of homes lost in this community to foreclosure. At the neighborhood parties and from our own social worker, I heard the whispered surprise that this or that family had lost their home. And in a couple of cases, there were grand community efforts to help save a mortgage. But for the most part, folks struggled silently, moved away quietly with an air of mystery surrounding the whole experience. Folks looked on with pity, with compassion, with fear. If it was possible for those kind, hard-working people whom we knew from the public schools or the gym or the library or the coffee shop, it could be us, couldn't it? Though we were thinking it, it was rarely spoken. That visibility which makes us most vulnerable is that which is also the source of our greatest strength, Audre Lorde writes. And I invite us this morning to live into its truth. As a community, we have long held an aspiration to be reaching out to those in need, both within and around us. We've made some great inroads to partnerships with organizations in Dorchester and Mattapan, and right here in Milton and in Quincy. But there's something that keeps stalling us, keeps us from really moving forward with a fullness of heart and intention. And I know that I hear and I feel it among us. And I'm going to speculate that there is a fear that we have, that we might be overwhelmed by the need. In fact, that's one of the hardest conversations we have, right? Which need do we respond to? There is so much. If I stop to help this one person by the side of the road, there are millions behind them in need, in all different kinds of need. How do we even prioritize which need is most urgent? Which one calls our hearts the most? But I am going to speculate that in our already overburdened lives, the thing that is the biggest burden is the enormity of that potential amorphous need out there. that there is actually a greater benefit that might be found in just walking into those relationships one by one, by reaching out to the one person by the side of the road and seeing where that takes our hearts, seeing how that shifts the burden that we experience in running kids to soccer practice and band rehearsals, and whether it might shift our perspective a little bit and make some things lighter even as others get heavier. I also think that we might feel lighter by sharing our burdens, by telling the stories of what troubles us, by what secret things are hidden within and among our own households that we have such a hard time speaking, and using those as ways to connect with people experiencing the same thing with different levels of financial security or job stability or emotional stability. I believe we might find courage and strength in the stories that we can learn and share in new ways, and that we can build an even greater story as we do. So I would invite us to revisit the possibility of entering into those tough conversations among us, not so we can continue our own navel-gazing among the privileged, which I know some folks have said to me they feel small group ministries might be, but as a tool for unleashing, for uncovering some of those truths that need to be spoken, the truths of the economic insecurity of these times, as well as the truths of how we might be able to help each other out. The truths of the ways that our collaboration, our ingenuity, our creativity can meet us in those points of deepest struggle and transform us and help us transform the world. So as we move into this week 3 in the new year, I just invite you to tell a little bit of your truth, a little bit of your story. Let it be a truth that's told in love, a truth that's told in kindness, a truth that's told because it's necessary to be told. Tell someone you love them. Heck, tell everyone you love them if that's what your theology says. Tell the story of your pain, tell the story of your triumphs, but especially those stories of your struggles to people who need to hear them, who may feel a little less alone or a little less desperate because of them. Let yourself go to that uncomfortable place that opens you, because chances are someone you're with needs the invitation to do the same. Let the stories of what is true come from within and among us, and not just from the collection of named and unnamed voices in that nebulous land of the internet and social media. Let us relearn compassion and the multiplicity of truth so that we can understand and enact the breadth and the depth of the justice that this world needs. We will need help. None of us can do it alone. We'll need each other. We'll need to know ourselves and to open ourselves to our own shortcomings. We'll also need to be willing to have faith that we might discover in ourselves wider horizons, bigger hearts, greater capacities for courage and resilience that we are willing to give ourselves credit for now. We will need prayer. So I invite us to join in prayer with a song that has been sung by struggling people for centuries, in which we're invited to connect the struggles of all people who have felt themselves running a race for freedom, for justice, for courage, and needed the company of the eternal and of one another in order to do it. Please join in singing number 348, Guide My Feet, as we enter into prayer. Please join me in prayer. Holy One of many names, search our hearts, stand with us, guide our feet, hold our hands as we walk together in spirit. When we have power and must decide how to use it, and when we feel powerless and need the strength of another. In our need of one another, help us to surround those in our own community who are struggling at this time. With Beth, we offer a prayer for John Trubiano, who's struggling with ALS. With Elise and Tony, we hold a prayer for the family of a neighbor who died suddenly at age 46. With Brian Kelly, we lift up and celebrate the life of his mother, Dorothy Kelly, and send prayers of comfort to Brian and his family. We remember those who were lost too soon, all of the unnamed possibility and potential. In our broader community, we lift up prayers for those taking up new positions of elected leadership, among them Boston Mayor Marty Walsh and New York Mayor Bill de Blasio. Guide them in ways of courage and integrity. Help them keep their eyes and ears tuned not only to the halls of power, but also to the alleys of suffering. And in our national and global community, be with those around the world fighting for clean water, including those in West Virginia, for the people in nations struggling for identity and peace, especially the Central African Republic, South Sudan, Afghanistan, Palestine. And we lift up the lives of important leaders lost this week, men who gave voice to their truths in powerful and controversial ways. Ariel Sharon, Amiri Baraka, Franklin McCain, Carter Camp. Let us be lifted up, too, as we share the joys of our lives and our thanksgivings. For the return to routine with fresh eyes and new goals at the year's beginning. For the hope and possibility in the warmth outside, however short-lived. For the sun that greeted us this day. For the ways we reach out, reach in, reach up in hope of connection, in the truth of compassion every day, and find ourselves sustained by that power. Let us find the courage to share our stories of standing for justice, our tales of wondering what justice could possibly look like, and our times of deep certainty of exactly what it feels like. Let us consider one thing we might do, one action we might take to step forward instead of back, to speak a truth, to live a truth. One thing we might have the courage to do to make justice real. In silent prayer, we hold our thoughts. Amen. Blessed be.
May we live and be with each other in a way where we express our truths and express them openly. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values.
Please join in the unison dedication. May these gifts be transformed into strength for this faith community, into comfort, food, and shelter for those in need, and may we be transformed by generosity. Please join in singing our final hymn, number 298 in your gray hymnal, Wake Now My Senses. This week marked the anniversary of the birth of the poet Gwendolyn Brooks, another important voice in the speaking out of voices from the margins. And I send you forth with her words. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. Let us go to live the ways that all of those words are true. Let us live and share and tell the truths that must be spoken anytime we can. In the name of the life of all of us, in the name of the survival of our planet, go in peace. Amen.